it with music, beautiful music. Hello, I'm Fred Miller, and this is Clyde, who always joins me just at perfect moments on the piano bench as I'm about to start here. This is yet another lecture in song, and before we talk about the incomparable Johnny Mercer, a little bit about me. I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, had a great classical piano teacher, and that was my background. I loved classical music. I loved grand opera as a little kid. And then on my 13th birthday, the Beatles arrived. Very good timing there, and I was totally drawn into the great rock songs of the 60s. And that would go on through high school till the summer after I graduated from high school. A friend showed me this ad for a big rock festival taking place in upstate New York, and we looked at that lineup and we knew we had to go, and we did indeed. We hitchhiked most of the way from New Mexico to the Woodstock Festival. He even showed up very prominently there in the poster. That was it for rock music, though. That was not just for me, but I think for the whole world, that was the peak of the rock age. I had never wanted to be a rock musician. I didn't think I would be a classical musician. I didn't know. I wanted to be a musician. I went to college very briefly, left and traveled around, and finally ended up in Greenwich Village. And at some point, somebody gave me an album of Ella Fitzgerald singing Cole Porter, and there my musical fate was sealed. The world of Gershwin, Porter, Kern, Rogers, Berlin, Fred Astaire, Judy Garland, Ethel Merman, Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, the Great American Songbook, as it's termed nowadays. Came up with the idea of a lecture in song, each one being a profile of a great personality or some aspect of American popular song. And initially, I thought, well, I'll have a dozen programs. If I'm lucky, I'll do songwriters and I'll do performers. And then it just kept expanding and finally ended up in 7 different categories, at least at this moment. I guess that's where it's going to stay. And at the moment, 75 lectures in song to date. This is all described in detail at fredmillermusic.com. Johnny Mercer has an exalted place among the greats, certainly. 1909 to 1976, as they say, when a lot of popular music was good and when a lot of good music was popular. That's the makings of a golden age, and he was most definitely a part of it. He was the quintessential American wordsmith. The New Yorkers, Gershwin and Larry Hart and Irving Berlin, Dorothy Fields, they were New Yorkers, and they spoke in that kind of language. That's the background most reflected that. On the other hand, Johnny certainly had that sophistication. He also could speak from a very rural sort of background, as I'll describe in a minute here. He was the master of flyover country, all those blue states. Somebody said that there are indoor writers and there are outdoor writers, and he could write about the indoors, but he certainly wrote about the outdoors in a most outstanding sort of way. He was a folk poet and created a lot of the physical imagery of America and put it into song. The natural beauty of the country and the people who live and work and play and love and everything. Johnny also was a personality in his own right. Aside from just being a creative personality, he was a hipster, and he had that impish, gap-toothed grin. He had a great radio voice. He was a hipster. He was a cool cat. He was a great singer, too. He was born 1909 in Savannah, family well-off, not landed gentry, but comfortable. Father was Scots background. His grandfather on the Mercer side, I was a colonel under Robert E. Lee, and that's why Harold Arlen called Johnny the Colonel sometimes. One of Johnny's forebears was a guy named Hugh Mercer of Princeton, who was a brigadier and general and confidant of George Washington. I think a signer of the Declaration of Independence, a pretty solid American stock there. Johnny's mother was Croatian-Irish, so he was a combination of a lot of things. That bucolic Southern childhood is really what sets him apart, I think, on top of everything else. This is a world he grew up with. He was a white kid who grew up with black kids right there. They went off to pick berries together. This is not the childhood of Ira Gershwin or Larry Hart or Dorothy Fields. Here he describes it. Johnny Mercer is here. We lived in the country in the summer. The roads were still unpaved, made of crushed oyster shell, and as they wound their way under the trees covered with Spanish moss, it was a sweet, indolent background for a boy to grow up in. Savannah was smaller then and sleepy, full of trees and azaleas that filled the parks which make it so beautiful. And as we drove out to our place in the country at Vernon View, there was hardly a scene without vistas of marsh grass and long stretches of salt water. Punctured tires on the Model T made the trips longer at times, but when the family arrived finally to spend that summer, there were many things to be done around our summer home. We had to get sawdust to pack the ground bin where we kept the ice, fill the lamps with kerosene, put up the mosquito netting on the beds, and have Manuel walk the cow out from the commercial dairy farm so we'd have our own milk all summer long. A country upbringing, certainly. Recurring imagery all shows up, the roads and the byways and the highways and the cars and the trains, and the people on those trains. This is what shows up again and again. For example, somewhere I read, or maybe it said, out of sight of out of mind. Maybe that's so, but I tried to go and leave you behind. What did I find? I took a trip on a train, and I thought about you. I passed a shadowy lane, and I thought about you. 2 or 3 cars parked under the stars.